we're now going to have we're now going to start panels. So we've seen the last few bits. We've had amazing talks. We've had amazing showcases. And really, the thing with the showcases is there are always use cases that are happening for the first time. And we've just seen 3 great examples. We're now going to have a panel discussion where I'm going to bring on Andy, who many will have seen in the Morta community before, and we'll have Dr. Ben Jowett from Wates, who has an amazing background by the looks of it. And there are 2 of the people who I would say have impacted the way that I personally think the most. They're very different people, as you'll hear in a second. They have really, really different approaches. But I think both are extremely valid, and they're 2 of the people who are pushing the platform forward and pushing us forward in our way of thinking. So thanks a lot for joining us today. It's really good to have you both.
Thanks, Scott.
Maybe let's just quickly start with a quick introduction from both of you on your roles, what you do, and like what you're after achieving. Maybe if we start with Andy.
Okay, yeah. Hi everyone. Great to be here. Just to quickly say, I mean, some of the talks and the showcase before this session, brilliant. So yeah, there's lots of learning and sharing, which is great. Some amazing use cases. So I'm head of digital construction at ALEC. We're a big GCC in the big GC in the Middle East, in UAE and KSA. I'm talking from Riyadh today, over in Saudi. And I guess I've got a department now of 17, 18 staff, mixture of managers, coordinators, engineers, who are all builders, I'm pleased to say, so we're driving information management, and like everyone I think who's joined today, we're on a bit of a mission to try and drive out Excel where it's not appropriate and move into systems, cloud solutions where appropriate. I could go on, but that's me in a nutshell.
Amazing. And Ben?
Cheers, Andy. Likewise, some of the things I've seen this morning really impressive. You can sort of see the concept of what Morta's about really playing out in practice with how everyone's building, for their specific use cases. It's really exciting to see how you can start layering other use cases on top of it as well. So looking forward to that. But thanks everyone for joining today. My name's Ben Jowett. I'm head of digital construction engineering at SES as part of Wates Group. Part of my role is sort of strategic leaning, so looking at how we better digitally transform the business in simple terms, and then the other half is more operationally focused. So how do we ensure that we're delivering against our digital operational requirements across the Wates Group? So a bit of both, but looking forward to the chat today.
Amazing. It's really, really good to have you both. It's also good to have the mix of the GCC perspective and the UK perspective, because I think you're both after very similar things, but you're in different regions. I'm going to start with, what are we trying to achieve? And you mentioned, I think you mentioned remove Excel where it's not appropriate. Like, you're not after removing all of Excel. Can you just walk everyone through what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, I guess I'll start then. So yeah, I mean this Excel is a great tool. It's not, we talk about getting rid of Excel, but it's still a very good tool and it has a purpose. And the simple way I think about it is, if it's someone on their own that needs to quickly pull together a spreadsheet, whether it's looking at finances, whatever it is, no one else needs to collaborate on it, then there's probably a very good use case for using Excel for that. And where, again, simply speaking, where it isn't appropriate is where we're trying to track things, as you've said, Mo, and everyone on the call. And there's more than one person that needs to input or collaborate on it, or even view it. That's my simplest way of explaining where it's appropriate and where it isn't, as far as I see things.
Amazing.
Because essentially data's siloed, isn't it? It's siloed in a spreadsheet. So if that data doesn't need to be shared, reused, then there's a pretty good use case for it staying in Excel. But if it does, then you need to move to something else, a system-based approach.
Amazing. Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, likewise, I tend to start from the top and work down, and you look at what the overall objectives of the business and where do we want to be in the short, medium, long term, and you start looking at different forms of metrics, how you measure that. So we want to be safer, we want to be more productive, we want to be more sustainable, we want to improve our profit margin, improve customer retention, etc., etc., etc. And I think, generally speaking, most functions and businesses are starting to recognise that there's a correlation between all those aspirations and targets and the level of digital maturity your business has. So then you start looking at, right, okay, how do we get on the ladder? How do we start making our businesses and functions more digitally mature? And then you immediately start looking at, well, how do we standardize process? How do we digitize it? How do we glean insight from it? How do we create connections between these pieces of data? So it's a very similar sort of approach to Andy, anchored in, strategic objectives as well, but also building that logical sense of how do we get out of these older, more traditional methods of working and work in a more synchronized and integrated way.
Absolutely.
We've heard a lot about information management like throughout the day. We've also seen some use cases that go beyond information management so far. So I'm just curious, like there's this perception within, generally speaking, that Morta like solely does information management in many ways. Like what do you think about that? Like where are you using it? Are you using it for information management processes? What else are you using it for? Where are you in that journey and in that thinking around where it should be used?
Ben, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Andy. So when we look across sort of the wider context of the business, we've got different levels of maturity of how we're applying Morta. So we'll have certain functions whereby, for example, our digital community are using it for master information delivery planning, as we've already seen this morning, which was equally driven by MOJ initially and DFE requirements. That's been quite interesting to observe how that's grown in time. And then you start looking at other areas of the business as well and how they can start to deploy Morta. So, for example, our digital construction managers are looking at things like BIM execution plans, which we've already seen this morning, and all the ISO 9650 related deliverables. But my sort of focus of attention is how do we take the principles of what that's trying to do and expand that into different business functions as well? Because fundamentally, it's how do we standardize and structure our data across functions? Digital construction information management, when you look at it through an ISO 9650 lens, is certainly one such way of doing it. But then you quickly start looking at, well, how do the planners do it? How do the estimators do it? How do the safety managers do it? The site managers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're still very much in the early stages, very much started with the ISO 19650 lens, but we're quickly pivoting into realizing what more we can do using that same sort of conceptual approach.
Awesome.
Sure. It's a similar file, and I think, Mo, you haven't yet mentioned that we were the first GC to implement Morta. I'm disappointed.
You were.
I think you deserve another badge, Andy, or something.
And I think the other thing is, it is actually true. Like overall, a lot of our exposure to contractors was initially through the MOJ as a client. We had the MOJ present last year about how they use the platform, and that's where we met a lot of people. And I would say what's happened then is a lot of you have picked up on it and done all kinds of things. What was interesting, it was Andy heard about it. He was in a completely different region. I mean, he had this shared like network given like previous work in the UK. I heard about it from Rob. Then it was like, I'm going to start using it. And he started using it for BIM execution planning. And he was actually the very first contractor to use the platform.
So that leads me. So we did start a few years ago, and the first thing we wanted to do was to examine our templates specifically for IM documents and trackers resources. So we went about building, ISO 19650 aligned documentation, pre-appointment bet, IDP, mobilization plan, all the things that ISO requires. And then whilst me and a couple of teammates were doing that, we quickly realised, my God, this is scalable. And this shouldn't just be restricted to IM stuff. We should be using this across other departments and teams. So yeah, over the last couple of years, I'm on a little mission to try and work outside of the IM, specific stuff, the BIM IM stuff, and try and influence sort of colleagues in other departments to help them streamline how they're tracking things, etc. So, I mean, at the moment we've got simple use cases like project directory, who's who on the project, which department, which person, what's their role. So that's managed in Morta typically as a template on our projects. We've even had a project director attempt a project execution plan, which I was delighted with. On a recent project, we've got project risk and opportunity register on the go. Some of our commercial team are using it for payment tracking. So of course that's handled in the ERP, but then they want to track other things outside of the ERP. And so we've got payment registers ongoing. And that's just project facing stuff. And then we've got lots of back office functions and use cases, even marketing. We use Morta to collect, or people from the business who are identified as kind of newsletter inputting people. They have a process, a link that's sent out monthly. They submit their news, whether it's images, under a number of topics in the form view of a table. That goes to marketing when they submit it. Marketing review, and they can also then send back out via Morta previews of what their newsletter page will look like for them to approve. So that's now been kind of semi-automated in Morta. It's quite an unusual use case. We've done a few ESG trackers. They've been pretty successful, just collecting information from around the business. What else? I have to write them down because I've got so many now.
You do have lists. I've seen them.
And there's a few other sort of staff and labour trackers where there's various things that people need to track and manage and report on. So yeah, anything that was a big clumsy Excel with lots of human error is a good candidate.
I think the point, to be honest, generally speaking, is you are losing. Maybe you should have you probably do, knowing you, like a tracker for the trackers that you've built on Morta. But
Tell me.
The point is you are moving like a lot of these trackers onto the platform, and obviously I have the benefit of, I know both of you and I speak to both of you quite a bit, and I think you have different approaches there. So I'm just gonna go like in a way straight into it there. So the way I see it is, Andy, generally speaking, you see an Excel that needs that has effectively these two criteria that you mentioned, like collaboration and should be standardized and may need to interface with another system. You go look at Morta, and I'm going to you and you're just getting them in. You're going build your own tracker. Sometimes you'll build the initial version of the tracker for them, and so on and so forth. Ben, a bit of a different approach. You do that sometimes, but you're going much more, we need to standardize design management. Let's look at a full scope for taking on our operational frameworks for design management and moving them all into the platform and integrating them and working with us as a team often to do that. Occasionally, you also see someone who's using something like a DFMA tracker like Rocus, and you'll go look at Morta. but I think you have you do have a different philosophy in a way about how you're going about the platform. We've also, just going to take it as a chance, we've had Henry talk about legacy systems and how people somehow build in-house software solutions within the EPC contractors, and whether we think that Morta has a role to play in that. And I know, Ben, you also are touching on a lot of that internally. So I just wanted to say these things because you're two of the biggest advocates for Morta, but you have I would say, very different approach in terms of how you go about implementing it and in terms of when you go, let's look at this. So can you just both like talk us through that a bit, and maybe let's start with Ben?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we do have slightly different approaches by the sound of it, but I wouldn't say they're mutually exclusive either. I would say that they can work in tandem with one another. Say if you wanted to run a hybrid engine where you like just get after it and digitize some Excel spreadsheets, do it. But then if you want to go more departmental or functional wide or business wide, you can run both in tandem. So that's quite interesting. But I would say my sort of underlying approach to how I'm trying to implement it is, I think as an industry, we tend to work in quite analytical and linear ways where we characterize ourselves as problem solvers, generally speaking. So we've got a problem, go fix it, and then go fix the next one, which tends to lead to sort of these linear thinking and linear solutions. And what I mean by that is it may be, I've got a Kobe validation problem, so I need to build a new tool that speeds up how I deliver Kobe. And that will get you so far. But once you start to realize that the performance of a whole business isn't determined by the parts of the business when you look at them individually, it's more a product of the relationships between those parts. You then start to think about the system itself and how do all those different parts of the business connect with one another and provide insight to one another to drive even further benefit. And that's really where my attention is how do we start connecting the dots between functions as much as how do we solve our function. So I would see it as a difference between sort of a linear approach or a systems thinking approach is probably the best way to characterize it. And like I said, I don't think either is right or wrong. I think you have to take a view on either based on the problem that you're trying to solve. But I think even if you're going at it from let's say a more linear route where you're saying, I'm going after specific documents and information management, like we're doing MIDPs and Kobe validation and BEPS, etc. I think you always have to have that awareness of the system that it's participating in. And that's really where the balance you have to strike, because there's certainly a lot of agility in just going after it in a linear way and say, just build it, crack on with it and do it. But inevitably, the next step in your maturity is going to be, right, how does IFC and Kobe connect with what the design managers are doing? How does it connect with what the estimators are doing, what the planners are doing, what the site managers are doing? And when you really distill it down around what the overall mission behind BIM, ISO 19650, all that type of stuff's all about, is all really about trying to digitize the whole industry. And I still see a lot of siloed approaches where BIM and ISO 19650 is kind of still retained with the technical specialists rather than being unlocked into other functions and departments. So I see that sort of systems approach as being a key vehicle to basically getting more people on board with the idea of standardized and structured information and data.
Yeah, I mean, agree. And I think it also depends how your business, how your company is structured, your position, your influence as well. I mean, for me, I'd love to. So we've got a mix of. So I'm a head of one of 6 or 7 or 8, I think, heads of department. So I don't, I can say, well, I'm Mr. Digital, but I can't tell someone the same level as me about to go and use this. So the way I have to position it is I try to show people examples, what's successful, how it can improve, makes things more efficient, and then empower them to take hold of it. And yes, like Mo said, let me help you build a proof of concept, but I want you to take ownership of it and you to manage that in your vertical. And also we do have, like Mo, I think you touched on, we have an internal IT application building capability in ALEC, and they're quite active. So there's lots of things across the back office that are built in other tools that have to connect and should connect. So I'm always very careful when I go about, because I've had my wings clipped a couple of times. What do I go at? Because sometimes I'll be going at something where there's a system coming that's either built internally or it's an extension of an ERP or whatever the hell it is, that's going to be doing that, taking care of that data in 2 or 3 months. So we've had quite a few use cases where it's a short-term resolution to getting out of Excel, getting a bit more data governance, reducing human error, and getting something fit for purpose until the intended system that's being brought in will manage it. Or it's something that's between the cracks that's never there's no system intended for it. Well, absolutely, that's the one to go at and to focus on. So yeah, it's a little bit sporadic, but I think operating within the limits of how we can at the moment.
I think there's something quite powerful in what you've said there as well, Andy, in one of the first parts of, let's say, more influence rather than control, because I've certainly found myself with certain functions where I fall into that camp where I don't have direct authority to say, thou shalt use this, but you have the opportunity to show someone there's a better way of doing this. And we tend to get stuck in that. We can build our own apps, we can build the whole lot ourselves, crack on and do it and invest a load of resource and time, or we'll buy something that's completely off the shelf that doesn't quite fit our processes, and then we get stuck in this inertia of some people want it, some people don't, etc. But the power that you have with something like Morta, with it being that sort of low-code approach, is it sits slap bang in the middle of those two worlds, which makes it quite... You struggle to define it sometimes when you're explaining it to people. But what has been the impact of it being is when you do show people what it can do, is that they take ownership and feel a sense of empowerment of it as well. And then they want to be a part of it because they feel like they have a say in how it's going to look and feel. And that's sort of a benefit you can't really quantify, really. It's more a cultural sort of shift that I've certainly seen.
Definitely. And I think as well, you can build, it's quite rapid how quickly you can replicate, improve and build and launch something compared to the traditional or the existing processes that may be configured in other systems. So you can very rapidly respond to the need, and I get a lot of feedback from people around the business. Christ, can you help us with this? Because I know we can scope it out for you, and you'll have it live in 4 days. Whereas other tools and systems, it's not such a quick, rapid delivery, I think.
And I think that's a key thing moving forward as we've become more digitally literate and customer needs become more demanding, is our ability to pivot and react quickly to change and emerging technologies. And again, something like this low-code approach gives you that ability to pivot pretty quickly and generate new solutions to emerging requirements. Whereas, if you're stuck in an off-the-shelf solution, you're just stuck in the inertia of we need to buy a new tool because the tools that we've got don't do it, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas you're building quite a flexible toolkit in something like Morta that enables you to start layering on top more and more things in time, which I find quite exciting.
I find I think one of the key things that you're touching on as well is how you get buy-in and how you manage change processes. And there was, as the teams earlier were speaking, a lot of the chat that was going on LinkedIn was about how people get that buy-in and how they manage change. So as a last question, because I'm conscious of time, I'm just curious, how do you both think of, I think when we were having one of the prep sessions, you called it winning the hearts and minds of people. Just curious how you're both going about that. Maybe Andy?
Hearts and minds. I mean, I think if you present the reasons why quite clearly, you don't get much of a challenge back, unless, like I said earlier, it's well, hold on a minute, we're bringing in a third-party solution specifically for this function or use case. There's if the argument is stay in Excel or move to something like Morta, then it's pretty clear to people. There's no challenge there. But I think it's definitely you have to show someone the benefit, like anything, isn't it? You can apply it to anything. But sometimes people just need to see something in action to go, okay, that makes perfect sense. That's going to make my life easier. So I definitely take a softly approach, try and slowly encourage and win people over, rather than just trying to, thou should be doing it like this and use this system, because that's when you naturally get a bit of pushback.
I find, for me, the first ask is, I find the implementation of what we're trying to achieve is requiring people to think about a problem that's bigger than their own project or their own functions, and to think about the system. And that can be quite a big ask for a lot of people, because we've all been there. We've been stuck in projects, and you have deadlines and and you've got all these sort of problems left, right, and centre. But the problem that we're fundamentally trying to shift is bigger than any one project. It's an industry-wide problem, if you really want to go to the macro scale, but it's also a company-wide problem. And what really is at the core of it is, how do we structure, share openly data and insight between businesses and functions? I really feel is at the core of what we're trying to achieve, and how do we apply a level of control to that sharing? And I think to win the hearts and minds side of it, I think you have to really start to get an understanding of the vision of what that system is, and how that can benefit the things, or the parts, whatever you want to call it. So, to give an example, working with the estimators in our business, the first few calls that we had around it was more around the concept and the idea, rather than the stuff and the things. And once you start getting bought into the idea of the vision, the things start to take care of themselves. But that vision thing, it either turns some people on or it turns them off. Some people just, it's too much too soon. It's like, I just need to get out of Excel and do something a bit smarter. But I think that's on us as well, to have an awareness of that bigger vision, but not necessarily burden the things with it, but making sure that when you're building the things, that it's in line with the vision. So that's kind of the balance that I strike. But I think the most powerful part of the hearts and minds is empowering people to feel like they've got a say in the direction of the development and the building. There's nothing worse than that inertia that comes when people, and it's a natural human reaction, that people feel like they're having something done to them without them having a say in it. And whereas Morta certainly gives you that flexibility for people to have a say and have a bit of a self-determination of how they want to build forwards.
Agree.
Amazing.
I think if I could just say as well, I think the other part of the jigsaw for us is we're in the process of sort of regurgitating and redeveloping a digital strategy. So we talked about this, almost the implementation layer, but the thing we're missing is a refresh strategy that identifies all the tools we're using, so that this will all come into the mix, and then we should have a bit of a strategic look on things and where Morta's being used, where it shouldn't be used, etc. That will then make that abundantly clear, and then we can communicate that better out, and then people start to understand better and come on board, I think, a bit easier. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you both for sharing. Thank you both for trusting us. Thank you both for giving us feedback continuously. I hope there are subtle things in what you've both said that I hope people can also see what I mean by you both have slightly different approaches. I do think both are very, very important. And I as a person, one of the hardest things in doing this is I also need to learn how to manage all of the different types of personas that are involved. I think you're both very good. The combination of the two of you and the way you approach it, I think, is what we ultimately need to get to, because I do easing pain is a very big part of it. Getting people's buy-in and them having a say for the people who are on the job, as like Ben also put it, is a very big part of it. And I think both are and empowering people on the jobs is very important. But then also, how do we sell it to the wider business and the bigger benefits that it can get? But ultimately, it's that mix of getting people on this journey with us and getting the wider benefits for the business. And I think between the both of you, we've widely cracked the wider range of benefits that we can achieve. So thanks a lot for sharing. Thanks for doing this today, and looking forward to seeing you in more and more of these.
I was going to say, it sounds like we've got a pincer movement between us, Andy, by the sounds of it.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Andy. Cheers, Mo.